During World War II, Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany committed one of humanity's worst atrocities. They executed over 6 million Jews, which included over 1.5 million children, for the crime of being an inferior race. One of their justifications for this egregious act was to quote Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, which states that nature does not wish that weaker individuals should mate with the stronger, because in such a case, all her efforts, throughout hundreds of thousands of years, to establish an evolutionary higher stage of being, may thus be rendered futile. Now this is a clear case of social Darwinism. It's an ideology that asserts that because within nature the strong survive at the expense of the weak, which is a warped interpretation of Darwinism, society ought to reflect this, which is a textbook example of the appeal to nature fallacy. It's as flawed as asserting that the age of consent should be 12, because in nature it's 12. That antibiotics, vaccines and GMOs are harmful because they're not natural, and that it's morally fine to eat meat because it's natural to eat meat. All of these assertions are united in the fact that they commit an appeal to nature fallacy. They assert that something is good or moral because it's natural, or that something is bad or immoral because it's unnatural, and thus they're all invalid. But alas, my purpose here isn't to debunk social Darwinism. It's to debunk the assertion that a lack of belief in a god or gods somehow leads to social Darwinism, which is quite the claim. This is Atheism Leads to Social Darwinism, debunked. In 1859, Charles Darwin published what I and many others consider to be the most important book of all time, On the Origin of Species. Within, he explained exactly how complex and seemingly designed organisms, such as humans, can arise from the entirely natural and unconscious process that is natural selection, otherwise known as Darwinism. Since then, every field of science that has anything to do with organisms has both supported and expanded his thesis, making it one of the most established and respected scientific theories of all time, and indeed, the very bedrock of biology. In fact, it's worth saying that while in science Darwinism is referred to as a theory, in everyday colloquial language, it's a fact. You're an evolved mammalian ape, and there is grandeur in this view of life. So that's natural selection, or Darwinism. It's a scientific description of the world. It describes nature, and that's all it does. It's not an ideology, it's not a religion, and it doesn't make any moral claims. It's a scientific observation that's supported by an overwhelming amount of evidence. While on the other hand, social Darwinism is a political prescription of the world. It's a name given to various ideologies that prescribe how society ought to be, based on how society is, which is where the appeal to nature fallacy resides. Or to put it more clearly, Darwinism is a description of the world, while social Darwinism is a prescription of the world that's based on a description of the world. Now before we go any further, for the purpose of clarity, I'm going to present the assertion that atheism leads to Darwinism in a syllogistic form. It goes as follows. Premise 1. Atheism is the belief that organisms are the product of evolution by natural selection. Premise 2. The belief that organisms are the product of evolution by natural selection leads to social Darwinism. Conclusion. Because social Darwinism is immoral, atheism is therefore false. Now the first flaw that I want to make abundantly clear is that the belief that organisms are the product of evolution by natural selection is not atheism, it's Darwinism. Atheism isn't Darwinism. Atheism is a single position in relation to a single question. Do you believe in the existence of a god or gods? If your answer is yes, then you're a theist. You might be a Christian theist, a Hindu theist, or even a Norse theist, but you're a theist. And if your answer is no, or I don't know, you're an atheist. And that's all atheism is. There's absolutely nothing else that atheists necessarily share in common. And hence, premise 1 is a false premise. And as a result, the conclusion is invalid. Atheism isn't Darwinism. Now before we move on, I want to make one more point in relation to this topic. While it's true that most atheists accept Darwinism and most theists don't, This isn't the case when it comes to Christians, including those in America. Indeed, a Pew study in 2014 revealed that with the exception of white evangelicals, most American Christians accept Darwinism, and this is especially the case for younger generations. And so despite the fact that creationists act as if they represent the interests of most Christians, they don't. That's just one more thing they lie about. Anyhow, moving on, the second flaw I want to make clear, and indeed the main point I want to make within this video, is this. Even if it were the case that Darwinism, let alone atheism, somehow leads to social Darwinism, this would not invalidate Darwinism. Darwinism would still be the bedrock of biology, and it would still be supported by every branch of science that has anything to do with organisms. And so, even if both premises were true, the conclusion would not logically follow, meaning that the entire argument is a non sequitur, which in the realm of logical arguments is pitiful, and hence it's game over. No ifs, no buts, the argument fails even if its premises were true. Now, to make this flaw a little more obvious, consider by analogy Wegener's theory of plate tectonics, which we refer to from here on out as Wegenerism. Likewise to Darwinism, it's supported by an overwhelming amount of evidence, and it's responsible for many astonishingly accurate predictions. Indeed, it's the bedrock of geology. Now imagine if various groups started asserting that Africans are superior to non-Africans because according to Wegenerism, Africa was once the capital of the world because it was at the centre of the supercontinent, Pangaea. Would the fact that various groups of social Wegenerists justify their despicable ideology by referring to Wegenerism somehow invalidate Wegenerism? Of course it wouldn't, and it would be absolutely ridiculous to assert that it would. And the same is true of social Darwinism. The fact that various groups of social Darwinists justify their despicable ideologies by referring to Darwinism does not invalidate Darwinism. And finally, let's take a swing at premise 2, the assertion that Darwinism leads to social Darwinism. Is it true? No, it's not. While it might be the case that all social Darwinists accept Darwinism, because, if you think about it, they have to by definition, this does not mean that Darwinism leads to social Darwinism, and those who insist that it does are committing a circular cause fallacy, because they're asserting that because X occurs in correlation with Y, therefore X causes Y. Now, to illustrate this fallacy through a more obvious example, consider the following. Every time I stick a fork in an electrical outlet, I get shocked. Therefore, my sticking the fork in the electrical outlet causes me to get shocked. See the problem? Furthermore, the majority of racist groups, which let's face it, is what social Darwinist groups are, both today and throughout history, have justified their racism not in reference to Darwinism, but in reference to religious scripture. And ironically, most of these groups are Christian.
What is the church explanation for the exclusion of blacks from the priesthood?
Joseph Smith and all succeeding presidents of the church have taught that the Negroes, while spirit children of a common father and the progeny of our earthly parents, Adam and Eve, were not yet to receive the priesthood for reasons which we believe are known to God, but which he has not made fully known to man.
Yeah, that's not social Darwinism, is it?
But like God said, Yahweh himself says, we will chase you out of here, and it's going to be a thorn.
Are you going to chase me out of here?
No, we're going to burn you out.
Are you going to burn me out? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do with 11 million immigrants?
Don't matter. Hey, we killed 6 million Jews the last time.
Whoa, wait a second. So Hitler justified killing the Jews by referencing Christianity? Oh yeah, he did, and on numerous occasions. For example, during a speech in 1933, he stated that the national government will regard as its first and foremost duty to revive in the nation the spirit of unity and cooperation. It will preserve and defend those basic principles on which our nation has been built. It regards Christianity as the foundation of our national morality and the family as the basis of national life. Anyhow, to recap, The assertion that atheism leads to social Darwinism is flawed because premise 1 is a false premise. Atheism isn't Darwinism. Premise 2 commits a circular cause fallacy. Darwinism doesn't lead to social Darwinism. And even if both premises were true, the conclusion would not follow. It's a non sequitur. Really, this argument is absolutely absurd. It's as logically coherent as insisting that not collecting stamps leads to socialism. As always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons. Without your support, this video wouldn't exist, and so thank you.